Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second Artcamp week and welcome to the first day of our Artcomtec seminars this week. I hope you have enjoyed the first day in your courses, and I would like to welcome you at the Artcomtec presentations, which are directed by our French guest, Mr. Nathan Karčmar. Welcome, Nathan. And Nathan has prepared a very long series of seminars and lectures for us. So this week, each afternoon, you will have a chance to meet with one exceptional artist through a video conference. So let us start for today. Welcome and enjoy. And Nathan, the floor is yours.
Okay, welcome to Artcomtec at Artcamp Pilsen. Today I have the pleasure to introduce Derrick de Kerckhove, whom I met 30 years ago during a symposium at Art Media in Salerno. Since 30 years we are friends and I could follow. He has been teaching at the Marshall McLuhan program at University of Toronto. He has been writing many books. Now I invite you, Derrick, to share the screen. Welcome.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Now
in Toronto.
Once again. Well, before I start, hello everybody, and let me just say that I'm glad I could see you because my experience with telecommunication is quite interesting. I find that, for example, when I do something by Skype or by, in this case, Hangouts, I have the feeling that you are really there, but not sufficiently strong. And let me explain. I gave talks in many different with many different media, Skype, Hangouts, internet, SMS, telephone, which is the worst. And the best experience I've ever had is totally paradoxical. It was on Second Life. I gave 2 talks on Second Life way back, and I was surprised at the feeling of co-presence that I had with the people in that experience. And I realized only later that the reason for that was that we were occupying the same space. We're not occupying the same space now. We're occupying, you are out there and I'm at the other side of the Atlantic. And while I know you're there and I enjoy your presence, my feeling is that it's only a second level kind of co-presence. Just to start on this theme of looking back from 1985 to 2015, 1985 is when I met Nathan, and it was at Art Media, and it was a very inspiring moment that followed on a long and arduous development of my understanding of communication art. And this talk is really about 30 years of communication art, which was invented, in fact, the idea was invented by Fred Forrest in collaboration with 2 other French people, and I'll be talking about those as well. This is where the inspiration comes first. It comes from Marshall McLuhan's statement, "The planet and nature were obsolesced by Sputnik, October 4th, 1957, and have become art form also. Sputnik saw the birth of ecology and art replacing nature." This was a founding intuition or insight, the idea that you could expect from the outer edge of the earth being technology, you could expect a transformation of our relationship to the planet.
On October the 4th, 1957, while the Americans were still finalizing their plans, Sputnik was launched.
Then its casing opened. The springs snapped, and the nose cone was pushed out of the way. A ball with 4 antennae emerged to go it alone in the darkness of space. And a radio began to send a signal back to Earth. Humanity had entered the space age.
So you can imagine that at the time when we just went by Pluto, one of the most amazing technological feats of humanity, these 30 years have been rich with development. Why is it that this observation by McLuhan is so important? It's because it introduces a reversal between nature and culture. Instead of nature deciding about the fate of humanity, culture takes over. And that is because the new age of planet Earth is now technology. As planet Earth is surrounded by the satellite movement and its attraction to the Earth, the idea being that the outer edge being technology, now the Earth becomes programmable. It is now possible to treat the whole world, the whole environment, as an art form. Culture takes command, and we change our scope. We start looking at the planet as the extension of our own presence in the world, and our own body rises to the size of the planet in some fashion. Enlargement of public space from continentalism to globalism. We are very much attached to the continent where our country belongs, but because of the flight to the moon, because of satellites, of course, this space is augmented to a global situation. That creates a new mental geography. In our minds, we carry, even in a semi-conscious way, the fact that our space is much larger than the immediate surroundings of our habitat. And of course, the role of art in this case is to make visible what is not evident to business people, to technicians, to all the people who are busy doing things but not reflecting on them. Art is reflecting on all these things. And I got very early an intuition of this from McLuhan, art being a kind of a bridge between the psychology of people and the technologies that are arriving in their lives. Phase 1, I call it phase 1 heroic because, boy, was it ever difficult. Nathan is there to tell you how difficult times we had. I put there the photographs of Fred Forrest on the left and Mario Costa on the right because the really sort of benchmark of how we started things was in 1983, 84, 85 with Art Media. And 1983, Art Media started by Mario Costa, was started along with Fred Forrest. And I'll be back to this. My own contribution is that I introduced arts at the McLuhan program, largely because of McLuhan's own indication. He used to say, if you want to know anything about the present or even the future, ask the artist. Don't bother asking the professional. Don't bother asking the teacher. Don't bother asking the governor. They don't know anything. They know about everything about the past and nothing about neither the present nor the future. So the McLuhan program had a virtual reality artist access program, which was run by Graham Smith, and I will show you some of the work of Graham Smith later. And in 1986, in Art Media, with Mario Costa and Fred Forrest, we started the first big transatlantic experience of art that we had in mind, and but we were not the first to do it, as you will see. My idea in showing you the work is to show you the work that was done then, as much as I can, because the records are very few, and then what the same artists are doing today. And so you can compare first how they are continuous in their approach to what they were trying to do in the first place, but again, how technology helps them enormously to improve on what they were trying to do. This was the Strategic Arts Initiative from 1986, and you can see we didn't have much money. This was the catalog. It was made on, four pages, double pages. The idea was to envelop the Earth. We already had a very strong global sensibility. The idea was that we were dealing with the whole Earth and not just with our local scene. This is one of the funniest things we did, which was the telephonic arm wrestling, with an idea of Doug Back and Norman White. And the arm wrestling idea was that you would push, as you can see, this person is pushing on a piece of steel. This was connected via telephone and a modem at 300 baud, you can imagine was very slow, pushing the signal to a similar machine in Toronto and allowing people to feel the pressure of the other person. It never really worked well because of the 300 bauds, but it was sufficient to inspire us with a very strong desire to transmit touch across the ocean. And of course, that we succeeded in doing after some fashion. This is the new iteration of the same telephonic arm wrestling, but in 2011, while we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the birth of Marshall McLuhan, this is a person who is using a much more sophisticated machine, much more real time, with very fast connection, allowing to really feel what the person is feeling on the other side. Here's an example described by the author, Norman White, of what happened.
Derrick, I just want to tell you that so far we only see one image on our screen there, the same image of the Earth. All the things that you described us, we don't see them. There is something going on with your presentation, with your screen sharing.
My presentation. I'm sorry about that because I have a lot of these and they're wonderful. My presentation is perfect. It's a typical kind of no talk between one company and another or one software or another. What I can try to do is to send you by Dropbox and then you can re-establish it yourself. But I don't know what to do about if the image, they appear perfectly well on my screen. So if you don't see them, there must be something really weird happening on your end.
Now we see your.
What do we do?
We see your PowerPoint. And maybe you choose just a PowerPoint window for screen share, not the whole screen, but just a PowerPoint screen. So maybe please turn off your screen sharing.
Yep.
Okay. In the blue line up there.
Just a minute. Just a minute. I have to get back to Hangout, and I don't know where it is.
Yeah, Hangout can stay there like is it, and you want to show us that in.
All right.
You
want me to do the screen share differently. So what do I do now? I just do, well, I'm on my PowerPoint right now.
Now
so what do I do?
Now we see you. We don't see your PowerPoint. We see your camera right now.
Hang on. Just let me see
and,
if I have just a...
So if you now want to show us your screen, please go to the left corner up there, and there is a...
Let me see if I'm okay now. Let me see.
Now we see your complete screen share. Yes, that's perfect.
Let's hope it's going to work. Sorry to keep you waiting. I have a problem with the goddess of technology. She doesn't like me. Every time I do a very good presentation, it falls apart. And it did, and you will see. It happened again and again and again. But you know what? I'll tell you something. If you have problems with your own art pieces, be proud of it. Because that's the proof that you're really doing something, that's ahead of your time. And so I'm not sorry about this. Nevertheless, let's see if this is going to work. So now what do I do? You see my PowerPoint? You see my whole presentation? All right. Well, we'll see if that works.
Okay. By the way, the telephone arm struggle, I did participate to it. I remember very well. It was at La Maison Canadienne.
How about now?
Paris.
Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, we see the video.
Force and position information over the telephone lines. Now it's going over the Ethernet using Ethernet interface. And the idea is as you push at one end, the person at the other end pushes back, and you can feel that they're pushing back, and eventually either I win or they win. The person who came up with the concept, his name is Doug Back, a Toronto artist, and the idea was to have one of these in the White House where Ronald Reagan would be sitting, and one in the Kremlin where Gorbachev would be sitting. And whenever there was a disagreement between the two countries, they could settle their differences by arm wrestling.
So that was one piece, and it was again, it was just symbolic because at the time we started, it didn't really work. But then the second time, of course, it worked very well, showing that Norman White and Doug Beck had been working at it for 30 years. David Rokeby is another very well-known international artist who created Very Nervous System, and that is something that here. This is the description by Rokeby himself. So the idea was that the computer observes the physical gestures of human bodies through a video camera. It translates them into an improvised music directly related to the qualities of the movement themselves in real time. The physical experience, and I did try it many times. In fact, I showed it all around Europe, carrying myself all the equipment. It was heavy. But it was an extraordinary experience because you could really connect between the camera and the sound. As you can see, the sound is very coherent with the movement. Then the new version of this was absolutely amazing. If I felt strongly the physical experience of dancing in front of the music and creating my own music, meeting somebody in space, in an invisible somebody in space, was much more powerful as an experience. Here's how David Rokeby describes both.
The original version back 25 years ago was much different in technology, certainly, because a lot of the technologies, all the technologies I'm using here today are technologies that probably just came up in the last few years. And 25 years ago, we had very limited means. So at that time, I had 2 sets of an installation called Very Nervous System. Each one had these very low resolution video cameras, 8 by 8 pixels. But 3 of them, very sensitive but very low resolution. And the computer was looking at the difference between video frames and getting a sense of the movement that was happening in the place. And then we connected these 2 systems, one that was in New York and one that was in Paris, and with what was a 300 baud modem, so it could send 30 bytes per second. So I sent 1 byte, one value 0 to 255, every video frame from Paris to Toronto, from Paris to New York and New York to Paris. And what those pieces of information described were how much movement was happening in that place. And so each installation took the differences between, or the similarities between the movements in the 2 places, and created a musical response that got very lush and large when people were moving at the same time, and got very sort of staticky and friction-like if someone was starting to move when someone else was stopping. So by paying attention to that, you could find your way to synchronize with each other at a distance of whatever it was, 6,000 miles, with 300 baud modem, 2 Apple II computers, and these very low resolution cameras. In this version, I'm using a Kinect sensor, which is giving me a 640 by 480 image of depth, with each pixel telling me how many millimeters away the object is. And from this, I'm able to build a bubble body, which is representing my body in 3 dimensions within this 2.8 meter cube of space. In Toronto, we have an identical 2.8 meter cube of space and a Kinect also looking at that space. So what happens is the 2 body representations, the one in Toronto and the one in Rotterdam, enter the same shared space. And when there are 2 in the space, you start to hear breathing. And the breathing is spread amongst the 4 speakers, so you know exactly the direction to move in to move towards the person in the other space. As you get closer, another sound builds, and when there's contact, when the bodies touch, you get at first just the sort of staticky sound, but then as you get closer and closer, the sound gets more and more intense and continually gives you this cue of the direction to move, so you can find your way to move and really pass through the body of the person in the other space. And I can hear it's over there, so I'm going to move. They're over here.
With reference to what I was saying before about co-presence in a similar space, that was very strong because, in fact, you didn't need visuals. All you needed was to relate to your to the sound, and the sound became very much of a tactile experience, a physical one, because as you got closer to the other person, you actually interconnected physically very strongly. So I had a almost more powerful experience in using this system by David Rokeby than giving a talk on Second Life. Karl Hamfeld and Laura Kikoka were at the opposite spectrum, I would say the opposite side of the complexity. They had decided to use the most simple system that was practiced by prisoners in a multiple cell prison, when people, in order to talk to each other, would hit on the pipes, which were on the pipes or on the wall, and had a special code in order to talk to each other. Karl Hamfeld and Laura Kikoka worked together at trying to create the same effect across the Atlantic.
Yeah, I'm Laura Kikoka, and the piece I did with Karl Hamfeld is called Knock Knock, and it involves two pipes and two cities. And the idea is when you beat on a pipe, you send a signal over to the other, and they receive it, and you can send it back, like so. And if someone's there, oh, they knock back. It's nearly the same if either of us could remember what that was.
So as you can see in that piece, you have the use of extremely sophisticated systems in order to come up with a very simple repetition of a very ancient tradition among people who were separated by, in this case, prisons. Graham Smith was the director of our virtual reality access program, and a man obsessed with two things: robotics, and telerobotics in particular, and total surround experience. He invented several systems well before we had Google's mapping and Street View. He invented systems to see the total surround of wherever the camera was positioned. In the case on the left, what you see here is the first machine. The left and center is the first machine he developed between Salerno and Toronto, with a very primitive camera, which you see there, allowing to see in a very pixelated way the vision on the other side. The difference was that you could actually command the movements of the robot so as to explore the other place where that you were visiting in a telepresent fashion. Here is something that he explains about what happened since.
This is the robot, which is an avatar of physicalness of the person on the other side. And this is Laura, who's our guest. And Laura, do you want to drive the robot forward a bit?
Sure.
She's using her body on a step pad, we call it. So she's using body motion to control the robot. And she can go left or right and look around. So it's an actual metaphor for the physical body. Instead of simply having a video conference, which is a fixed hole in space, this is a metaphor for a video conference which is actually mobile. Just like you can move your body through space, this is real telepresence where you can actually physically go out and explore. Because that was the idea I had in the original piece, was that this idea of exploration is something that you scan around, you look around the room. And I really like this idea that I can't control what she's doing. I can go over and control the robot in her perspective, but if she wants to run into me or go somewhere else or not talk to me, that's up to her. So it's the idea of having control over a machine on one side of the Atlantic and yet no control on the machine on your side of the Atlantic. And that's the real beauty of the piece, I think, is this idea of exploration and the body as a physicalness that moves through space.
So you can see that the continuity of his work. He has now a company that is running robotics for children who are in hospital and who want to not lose their time in classes. He actually has the supply student, and so the robot is in the classroom, and the child in his bed can actually guide and intervene and ask questions and see the professor and see the other students, which is a very social kind of use of this initially technological art piece. Here we are in phase 2, 77 to 2008. You must see that I've changed my dates from 85 to 15, 77. Why? Because what we were doing was actually joining the currents of other explorations that had happened before. And in 1977, one of the most inspiring pieces that I ever saw, and which really got me going in doing this phase 2, was Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz's magnificent piece, which I'll show you right now. Here it is.
In 1980, artists Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz placed life-size video displays at the Century City Mall in Los Angeles and Lincoln Center in New York. They connected them using a satellite link, sculpting a hole in space. At first, passers-by were unsure what was happening.
Now you're all so much involved with Skype and other things and Hangouts that for you this is banal. But when I saw this for the first time, it created a huge emotion.
They look like young people in a show. They're just people like you and me. My God, it looks like chorus line having a little lunch break. It must be. They just walk by someplace and like they're just talking. They saw this side. How did you get here? They're probably just walk. Do we know what's going on? Do you know what's going on? No, not really. They're in New York. They're in New York? I'm in Los Angeles, right? Are you? Yes.
Galloway and Rabinowitz showed that rich human communication was possible over a high-speed link. They showed that size and bandwidth do matter.
All right, so that's the inspiring thing. Let's go back to what it did inspire, which is Les Trans Interactifs, November 5th, 1988. Les Trans Interactifs was a much more ambitious experience than the Strategic Arts Initiative of 2 years previously. Technology had slightly improved, and we were eventually, we had about 17 artist performances between Toronto and Paris, and let me just show you what happened. See what I'm saying about the goddess of technology? She really doesn't love me. It took a year to prepare this. So that's what it worked fine during the testing period, of course. Well, semi-fine. The split screen technology was perfect. Eva Lenzner on the left is in Toronto. And she's a professional dancer. So here we're still into the attempt era, and here's the moment when it stops. And that's exactly the sound we heard. They say that it got hit by lightning. Not at all. That's a mistake. It was not by lightning. It was a drunken driver who brought the pylon down, which had the transmission relay, and that was the end of that. So I'm not quite sure why the documentary talks about Atlanta. It had nothing to do with Atlanta. It was on Staten Island in New York. This is me, quite desperate, trying to explain what happened. And this is the same artist working, well, not the same dancers, but working on a much better connection a few years later. This is what we wanted to do and didn't manage to do. Somebody dressed in black on a white background and somebody dressed in white on a black background and people dancing together.
Last night I made...
So that was the inspired by Hole in Space. The first, by the way, Hole in Space is 1980, but the very first thing that Kid Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz did was in 1977. That's why, for the benefit of historical veracity, I've put that date. Then, of course, many artists have done things in different parts of the world. You had a chance to listen to Tom Klinkerstein last week. One of my favorite pieces by Tom is an old friend as well. We met as well at Art Media in Salerno. Was joining McDonald's. Again, what I like about the, I would say, the sensibility of communication art is that it doesn't necessarily hit on high-tech only. Content is important, and also ironical content is important. So joining McDonald's of the world via video conferencing, which was done in 1984, was a very important experience. On the left, you see Tom in a gravity suppression system where he is floating in space. Tom's obsession has always been both with communication and space, the idea of space. We had Vincent John Vincent, who had invented with his team a system that allowed people to connect by camera, a bit like what David Rokeby was doing, but in this particular case was at a distance, modifying images, sounds, and so on. And one of his more recent work was this one, which is quite enthusiastic because what John Vincent is doing is actually playing, and very well, playing a drum. As you can see, he is doing it at a distance, but he might as well have the drum beat next to him. The speed of the system is excellent, allowing him to have real-time response. So this was a local interaction, but of course I had a long association with John Vincent, and we did a lot of transatlantic things with that. Not only when PictureTel became more, PictureTel was the video conferencing system that we had at the McLuhan program. When it became very functional, long before Skype, of course, we were able to do all kinds of performances in various parts of the world. Stefan Bajo, here I want to show a few French artists. Stefan Bajo is an artist who does also communication art and whose, again, piece is very simple. He simply wanted to bring together the vision, real-time vision of the sky in two different places at once. And he called it the day and the night, and he did many of these experiences. I thought the poetry of the idea was what was more important. as opposed to, of course, the use of video conferencing, which was becoming quite frequent at the time. Poor Jean-Marc Philippe is not with us anymore, but he did a lot of beautiful pieces, and one of the ones that I found more interesting, and for which I actually requested that he be nominated for the Ars Electronica prize in 1996, I think it was Message à l'Univers. What he had done was he asked, by using Minitel, which was the equivalent to our communication systems today.
Can I stop you for a while?
Yep.
Because we have now
What's the matter?
some small problem.
We have some problem with the sound, Eric. I don't know, Derrick. I don't know if it has to do with your mic or it is. Tu nous entends?
Oui, je t'entends très bien, mais qu'est-ce qui se passe? Il y en a marre à la.
Derrick?
Oui.
I don't hear you. Do you hear?
Okay, I don't know why, but let me just see if I can do something about it. This is dramatic.
Derrick.
Oh dear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's back. Okay, all right.
I have no idea why it's. And how long was it without sound?
Just
everybody's watching their. Everyone is watching their smartphone, so I'm sure it must have been a long time. I'm sorry about that. What can I do? Except continue.
It
all right. So
for 20 seconds, something like that. It was.
Oh, okay. All right. So. As I said, Jean-Marc Philippe used Minitel, the first video text in France, which allowed him to ask people to put a message of a one page in a database, and that database was contained into a satellite that was containing, of course, a memorandum of humanity to the rest of the world. I don't know where that satellite is now. Maybe it's dead. Again, artists don't really care about the actual technological dimension of their performance, but they do care about the symbolical, and the symbolical requires that they do all the work to go to it. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, well, it still works. And that's the whole point of Message à l'Univers, which I thought was, again, very poetic and using technology to make a statement about humanity. Fred Forrest, one of the founders of the art of communication, here with Pierre Restany, an important critic of art, has been at it for more than 30 years and continues to do extraordinary things today. One of his last pieces is this one, Le Centre du Monde, which is an interesting approach. He actually put at l'Espace Gardin in Paris a display center where people could send messages from different parts of the world after being invited to do so by Fred Forrest, so that the idea was to give the impression, give the sense that on one hand there was Fred Forrest saying that himself was the center of the world because he connected with the world in that particular position. And in some interesting way, that is also something that tells us something about ourselves. While there was an interruption of sounds, everybody rushed to their smartphone. Well, the smartphone is the center of the world, or you accessing your smartphone is the center of the world. And that's a bit the message that was contained in this piece by Fred Forrest. Phase 3, 1908 till today. This is one big connection between communication art that I tried to underline by describing some work as global art. And of course, global art is much more ancient. What you can see here are three of its pioneers: Tommaso Felipe Marinetti. Time and Space died yesterday. You can see Marinetti on the right, done by Fernand Léger. Moholy-Nagy on the left, telephone painting and many other things. Moholy-Nagy ordered somebody to do an enamel painting by describing what he wanted to be done by telephone. Again, something today which would be banal, but when he did it, was certainly part of the extraordinary, innovative art movement of his time. And Nam Jumpai, Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, which was truly global, was a television and an art performance that was addressing the rest of the world and was exactly showing the beginning of this very strong sensibility of global dimensions. Yves Klein, we can't forget him, many iterations of Le Globe Terrestre Bleu. As you know, Yves Klein was known for having selected to make all his work with that particular color of blue, which sort of vaguely reminds you of IBM, but has nothing to do with it. The blue of Klein has become a cult color in many parts of the world, and of course, the global sensibility of Yves Klein is clearly expressed in this Globe Terrestre. When can we speak about global art? It refers to art created no longer from the standpoint of Western cultural superiority, but from the experience of globality and under conditions of globalization. Obviously, what we're doing right now is a kind of a global art in the sense that we are experiencing the globality of our connectivity. And that is something that is, I think, an important thing to have, especially if you're an artist. One of the pioneers of this global art is actually a space artist, Joe Davis, who is at MIT and continues to do not only extraordinary art pieces but also brilliant talks about it. One of his projects that failed because it was also a huge accident. The Red Ruby Falls was in the 1986. There were 7 barrels of minium color, red minium, that were supposed to be thrown from Challenger 7, I think it was, and they were supposed to be thrown away from the Challenger, which was, of course, carrying a mission in space, and 7 people died in that mission, as you may remember, and so the Ruby Falls never actually happened. Another experience of a misfortunate failure, certainly a horrible moment, but at the same time, a real experience of art trying to do something against all odds. So what are the definitions that I could give of global art? Well, first of all, a term for works that trace the history of images and their worldwide dissemination. A reference to those works which managed to overcome the outdated geopolitical division of the world into Western, non-Western. A world intelligible and common visual and auditory language. And of course, it can also use themes concerning globalization. There can be many definitions, of course, to the global art, but the practice is what tells the story. I'm very fond of Ingo Gunther's work, where what he did was to collect statistics from different sources, different research, and he made exhibits of 40 to 100 globes where he would represent these statistics. That's a static form, but it's still a communication art form because it communicates the presence and the globality itself of our planet, and the fact that our experience translated into statistics is distributed across the whole planet. And you might say, well, you know, art doesn't define a space. In this particular case, it's the purpose of the global art is precisely to define that space, the global one. So that's one of its orientation. I was involved with this piece, which is called The Global Person. On the left, you see the 2008 version, which is an homage to Nam June Paik. It's a 6-meter high figuration of a human, and every piece, 33 screens actually show different parts of the body, and every part is related to a server, and that server actually sends images of the part of the body that is available on the server. I suggested then that what we should do was in fact not have closed system with servers, but an open system using images from Flickr, from Instagram, and have this vision, this character, created by people from the planet in real time. Again, it's something that was more of a symbol than an actual practice, because the classroom that was supposed, the class of the Naples Academy of Arts that was supposed to put it together, never completed it, nevertheless, again, the symbolic value is the one that we wanted to project. The user is a true content, both of the art form and of the earth as medium. This is radically opposed to the intent of any form of Renaissance art. In fact, Renaissance art always makes the spectator in front of the spectacle, in front of the scene, whereas virtual reality brings the spectator into the scene, and that is, of course, a symbolic expression of what is happening to all of us. We're no more in front of anything, we're at the center of everything. Like the Centre du Monde of Fred Forrest, we basically are into the movement as opposed to be simply spectators. One of the most beautiful and poetic pieces of global art is by Raphael Lozano Hemmer. You may have heard about this because it's really very famous, but he did it to celebrate, up to a point, to celebrate the passage from the 20th to the 21st century for 6 days before, during the, around the date of the 31st of December into the 1st of January. What you see here at the center is a program that was available anywhere on the planet, allowing people to decide what kind of pattern, by clicking on different rays, what kind of pattern they would want to show on this side in some place in the world. In this particular case, El Zócalo, which is the main square of Mexico City. Raphael is partly Mexican, partly Canadian, and partly Spanish. Don't ask me how he managed that, but anyway, he got the Mexican people to accept to lend him military beamers. These beams are zircon searchlights, and he put 18 of them on the top of buildings around El Zócalo and allowed people to, every 3 or 4 seconds, send a different pattern that people who were on the Zócalo could actually see. As you can see here, it's a very beautiful effect, and I can show you just a short example, accelerated unfortunately, of the same piece, not at that time, but for the Olympiads of Vancouver in 2006. This is accelerated, and in fact you can't see the progress of how the people were doing, but you can see the very rapid change of the images that are created by people from all over the world. And I'm very moved by this piece because it is something that shows the unity of not only the artistic process, but also the global intervention that is allowed. He has since that time done many, many iterations of this project. Another brilliant artist of global emotions is Maurice Benayoun, who is now working in Hong Kong at the Randran Shaw Center, Media Arts Center. He has been focusing on many pieces concerning the emotions. One of them is this one, which is called Emotional Traffic from 2005. And what this does is you can go online, go to the site which presents this piece. You select out of 20 different emotions, 5 of them, click, and then those emotions are found by a search engine in 3,200 cities around the world. And where those emotions are featured more often by keywords, they create a map of an emotional presence, at least, or emotional interest in the planet. Again, a very strong statement about the unity of the planet and the emotional dimension of the people who inhabit it. One of his most beautiful pieces is this one, which is a more recent piece, and it's combining the emotions and the winds. As you know, you can see magnificent winds, the simulation or real-time simulation of how the winds are moving on the planet, and he equated emotions and winds.
One of the consequences of the computerization of art is that we now consider the world to be fully quantifiable. The financial sector has been the primary beneficiary of this generalized quantitative information. As a consequence, performance-driven economics have replaced politics as the most influential force driving the city. In this transition, the people, the city's principal raison d'etre, have been neglected. The global nervous system that is the internet helps us at once to feel and understand the causes and effects of computerization in real time. Beyond economics, online news and current affairs reflect the ever-changing emotional states of the world and reveal the importance of the human in political and financial dynamics. Part of the Mechanics of Emotions project, Emotion Winds makes currents of emotion visible. Emerging from 3,200 of the largest global cities, the currents are recorded in real time all over the world. The artwork reveals how the emotional sensitivity of the planet can be the initial driving force of social and economic changes, and how, conversely, economic changes can provoke human emotional responses. Emotion Winds is a poetic instance of what Maurice Benayoun calls critical fusion. It's the existence of a fiction found at the very heart of reality, which enables us to decipher the world. Blown and tossed about by the wind, the human factor returns.
The human factor returns, indeed. This is the last piece I will show you. It's quite recent, by Christophe Bruno. It started out as a joke, and then ends up being one of the most surprising global sensibility, bringing together the utmost of the present with the medieval monks' practice of praying for the world. We wear all mankind as our skin in the electronic age, said Marshall McLuhan. And let me show you why this is both very funny and at the same time very serious. I have to get to the right place. So it's called Wi-Fi SM. And what you see here is a little sensor that you can put anywhere on your body. In this case, Christophe Bruno puts it behind his ear. Like in the same way that Maurice Benayoun allows a search engine to find 3,200 sources, databases of keywords, you can do the same thing with 4,500 news sources worldwide, and you can choose among several negative emotions, fear, anger, tragedy. Right now, we would have a great number of those available to us. And every time that you reach a certain level, that you reach a word that has a certain frequency on these 4,500 news, you get an electric jolt on your skin. Well, you might think that's funny. How is that possible? But in fact, what happens there is that, what happens there is that you are in a situation which is comparable to the sensibility of the medieval monk who was beating his flesh to expiate the sins of the world. It sounds like it's a joke, and this is what Christophe Bruno said to me. It is a joke, but then he took it seriously and then developed a system that allowed you to actually really feel this, and it became for him much more of a serious experience, a very interesting one. And I think, again, that's very much a piece of global art. And this is my last image. It's a piece of art which I find very exciting, and it allows me to actually conclude my presentation. Here it is. The reason I chose this is because I think that connectivity is clearly expressed here, expressed on land, in water, all over the planet. A huge testimony to the presence of humans on the planet. A sense of
permanent interaction, an indication of where the action is. Where you see more light, you see more action. If you go to compare North and South Korea, you will be amazed to see the difference. There is practically no light in North Korea, and South Korea is practically all light. It also gives you a sense of the proliferation of all the contacts in the world. So that artists of telecommunication art, global artists, are people who actually were foreseeing this development, recognizing its importance for human dimension, and I assume that this kind of work continues to give us always more than technology, give us, you might say, something to do with humanity. Et voilà. If there is anybody left, if there are any questions, I am perfectly willing to entertain them.
Is anybody wants to ask any question to Derrick? Well, we have been following very carefully your presentation. Derrick, I want to tell you that it was quite a feat to succeed to present us not only 30 years of Esthétique de la Communication, but if we include global art, it's over a century. You succeed to present some of the most important aspects and events of this adventure in less than 1 hour. I am very moved, I would say, to see all those colleagues, those friends in your presentation. And I'm very happy to have you here to present to our Pilsen students what you have been presenting all over the world with all in all the university you have been doing your work. So merci beaucoup. Thanks so much, Derrick, for your participation.
Okay.
And
that was fun.